how would you describe training for competition against training for GPP or something like that?
So for me, when I first started CrossFit, it was more of that challenge. Being just fresh out of high school and after my gap year, it was more so just a nice outlet for me. And I would like to think that most people who come into CrossFit, want that bit of that physical challenge to just, have a separate space from their work setting, or just, their for them to learn something new or to be around community. So when it comes to GPP, you kind of look for the little things of what I could achieve in that moment. And it's more, I guess, it can be a little bit more intense. When I decided to, see what the next challenge was, there was the competition side of things. The way I saw it, though, I felt, knowing all the movements that I did, that I had to take time in understanding all the movements before I could actually go to that level. And quite openly, I'll talk about it in a sense that it was also very much a mental thing for me, because there is always the physical side of things, but competition for me was more of the mental barrier I had to kind of develop over time. And it takes a lot of patience to be the athlete, because it's not going to be quick fits. It's something that you will have to develop over the years and being very consistent. And over the years, talking to a few different coaches and actually being under one coach who coached me from my ACL to um, roughly the end of last year, was that it's gradual progression and there were going to be setbacks. And it wasn't always about going hard every single session. It was knowing how to focus on being self-aware. So it really puts it on a spectrum. Like, most people get it for the feeling of a different outlet. For those in competition, it's actually a lot more demanding. So there are going to be things that you would have to sacrifice, but also be willing to understand and be okay with the process.
How did you get into coaching?
This one's a funny story, because same to when I started Muay Thai. So I was training with my coach at that time for about maybe just under a year. And I was doing 3 sessions a week, probably training 5 days for this fight. And my coaching wasn't originally in CrossFit, it was in Muay Thai. So for me, it was such a huge jump, because I wasn't naturally someone to stand in front of a big crowd, which seems quite bizarre. People kind of have seen me quite recently that I was able to talk quite comfortably. So coaching came to me, like I said, in an unexpected way. Um, so one year it started with Muay Thai, and then eventually it seeded into CrossFit, because I knew that was probably what I loved the most. And once I could, ignore a lot of, I guess, internal, like, this person's judging me, it was more about sharing my passion and how I could help a person. So about maybe 2000 and maybe 15 or 16, I started to take on coaching in CrossFit, maybe 1 or 2 classes a week. And from there, that's where I wanted to take it a bit more seriously. So after I got my L1, I went into a lot of different courses just to make sure that I was also developing. Um, One of the key aspects I would believe as a coach and as any trainer out there, that the moment that you stop learning is you're just limiting yourself to all the other things that come out these days. And knowledge is endless, and it's such a valuable asset and tool. And to understand it from many different levels, it's almost like having many tools added to your toolbox in case there's, someone that couldn't understand one context of something or experience. You always have more to share. And that's what I love about, I guess, coaching CrossFit. There's so many movements and experiences, like, it never ends. For me, I'm quite a patient person, but I don't think that it should be in any particular beginners or advanced. I would like to be with beginners more, because I understand what it feels like to walk into something completely new and just be overwhelmed, and just, you can feel like you make a lot of mistakes. But one of the reassurances, and I know any coach can do it, is making sure they have the confidence and capability of, showing up and just enjoying each step of the way. And I think that's why I enjoy taking on beginners a lot more.
As a coach, what are your pet peeves?
So one of the things I'm very big on is punctuality.
Mm-hmm.
More so in preparation of a session, it's more so value of their time versus my time. And I want to respect, like, you show up with an intention or a purpose. Uh, I think this is just more of a eternal thing. I would like to say comparison is the thief of joy. So if someone already doubts their abilities, like it's not anything against them, but I hate
Mm-hmm.
the fact that they are already doubting themselves and even trying. And I want to be able to hopefully get people in a better mindset.
Yeah.
That is just something that I'm always trying to emphasize, not necessarily in an attitude, it's a bad attitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's more so that it really hurts me as a coach to already see people devaluing their capabilities or the worths in a session, honestly. And it comes on a day because coaching is, I think, one of the most underrated things that most people realize. I think most people that haven't experienced it for themselves going, you just take someone through a session. But there's a lot of different aspects, and it's really hard to, keep on all levels as a coach these days. And one of them is actually, understanding your client's lifestyle or how they respond to certain things. So it's really hard to dictate unless you have that level of trust and they're quite open with you to assume like they could be not coping well in a certain work environment, something might have happened personally. And it's just training should be a safe place where they can feel like they can conquer anything with no judgment at all. And, I find that's a really big responsibility we hold on our heads.
Have you ever coached kids?
Yeah. Yes, I have.
How was your experience?
It was a little bit different. I would like to say it's relatively like coaching your beginners. But I generally say for most coaches, if you know how to coach kids, you'll be pretty good at coaching majority of the levels. Depending on the age bracket, it requires a lot of patience, different cues. So whether you're more hands-on, very visual, or simplifying words, it's a really good starting platform. Of course, it's not for everyone, but the first time I did it, it definitely required a lot of reminding, connecting with the group in a very fun, um, disciplinary also is very important as well, just to know how to handle different attitudes towards a session. So I think it was actually a very great experience. I think it's a healthy reminder that you can always have the bit of the work and development and the bit of play as well. I think even to this day and age, we can always be so serious about the training. Sometimes we forget the play aspect. Um, this is something that I was actually taught in my facility. And once you can have the understanding of both, you kind of will evolve and you just don't forget the little joys in life.
That's true. How is it like now coaching in this pandemic?
This has been very different. Yeah, no one would anticipate that would be coaching virtually or jumping around the living room with dull light. Like depending on how you look at it, most people would have had a big shock. I can understand that. Not a lot of people are used to just having a look, just the front end of a person and not being able to see them and give as much, I guess, coaching cues. So in two ways, one, should actually open up a hindsight of developing your understanding on how to see things better, or now know how to use your words, or just understanding real more connectiveness. Because if your clients are in a session, you would like to think they want to have the most attention because they're still really invested in themselves. Um, at the same time as coaches, and I'll speak on majority of the coaches that I've spoken to, like it can be very overwhelming because it's not you have to have a level of energy that you want to deliver, because it's not like anyone can exactly walk into an environment and your feeling of how you felt the stress of work has changed. Your coach will actually have to do that for you, and it's very tiring. I think everyone has the feeling of like Zoom fatigue and burnout in a way, but I don't deny that at all. It is coaches that I believe want to give the best value for their clients will do it, but it comes at a sacrifice that we can be quite burnt out. Like I felt that I think we've had a discussion about it going, how can we, you know, serve ourselves and serve our clients? It can get so tiring, but guaranteed, I think the support of other coaches, we were able to pull each other up.
Now that you've already had a seminar just recently, how does it feel as compared to doing Zoom classes?
I feel like that I was glad to kind of have a open floor of just talking. For me to learn as much as what I did behind the screen, it was such a different feeling because I could actually put a bit of tone and just see the reactions a bit more, that connectedness versus the screen, which I only rely on, you know, pretty much tone and a little bit of, body signals. Um, I find doing the workshop was a little bit more intimate because, people were sharing the smiles and the things that click. You can actually see it with the real in FaceTime. So it was such a rewarding feeling to have that again. And it was so bizarre to really think like that was the first one in over a year, I think. Even more. I'm not too sure, to be honest.
I'm sure it felt genuine and authentic.
100%. Yeah.
Let's dive into women in fitness. Being a woman in the CrossFit world, were there certain perceptions or certain notions you got from different people?
Yeah. Starting as a female CrossFit coach, especially quite new, I was lucky. So in Australia, that's where I started a majority of my coaching career. I did have, however, some encounters where quite openly, like your OGs or your longer term members, in particularly males, that wouldn't get as much respect. I would say because I'm a female and they probably haven't seen my ability. It's not really my idea of the understanding. I've never asked that question. And so it gotten to a point where I would, join into the classes just show that I actually can do the movements, but I'm hoping you can just take on board some of the advice that might actually help you with the training. That's probably another pet peeve for me is actually having to prove my knowledge just by doing high skill movements. Like I don't really want to have to do that, but sometimes that's actually what it takes. Once I started to develop my skill set as an athlete and a coach, one of the things I wanted to make sure and try here and there was competitions to, understanding different platforms, especially if someone at that level needed to develop, I needed to be able to understand that. It was uncomfortable for me as a coach, but at the same time, I knew it was going to be a nice tool to share a bit of the experience and just give a broader understanding. Coming here was probably a very different feel because I probably wasn't as well known until I started to step into the local competitions. I think the first one that I did was, I think, Manila Throwdown 2018, where they had ring muscle ups. And it wasn't until that competition where I started to get, I guess, a lot more awareness of what I could teach and how I was as a person. It was quite tough as well because those who are in CrossFit can understand that's actually quite a high skill level. But those who just see me and I just explain I'm a coach, I was actually looked down quite a bit. And I still sometimes do to this day. I just have to remember that, I'm comfortable with my knowledge and, it's up to the person if they want to seek help. That is a thing. But it is still very much an ongoing battle. But I just have to remember it's nothing that I have to always prove. As long as I have the knowledge and if the question gets ever asked, then I'm prepared to answer it.
Have other women approached you with the same problem or the similar problem?
Yeah. A few of the seminars that I attended, I think this was maybe CrossFit level 2 or some gymnastics workshop I'd run. Some of them would come up to me afterwards saying they're a little bit intimidated with asking male coaches. I think it was a sense of not knowing how to communicate to their coach, because I think the answer they got back wasn't the answer they were looking for, or there wasn't that same level of understanding. We can be quite in touch with our emotions, and it's not that everyone isn't like that. It's just knowing how do we experience it. We all respond very differently. I'm quite an empathetic person when it comes to that. So when I was talking to a few, I guess, same level coaches, it was almost they have to talk in defense. And it was just, sharing the same experience of, how can we, create the same level of understanding to essentially, help everyone with that, we have to prove ourselves, but just work together and meet halfway. And that is always an open-ended discussion. And I think it is very important in this day and age now too.
With regards to fitness, why do some women perceive of lifting weights as getting bulky?
If social media hasn't evolved the way it is, I think it's very much that. The perception of, lifting iron and weights has for a long time been in the persona of a male figure. Um, like it could have gone through a female, but it probably wasn't taught. And I think this applies in very different lifestyles or beliefs. So living here for a year has really opened my eyes. Like Philippines is very traditional, I guess, in a household setting, meaning that the males will tend to work and females will just be at home looking after the kids and doing home chores. And I don't think it's just been in this frame of mind that females could be capable of doing it. And the power of advertising and social media is like it's a lot of the males tend to go to the gyms. And it just wasn't a very much discussed topic as to why females could do the exact same. So I think once that started to see it in a bit more, that was always the perception, and it hasn't really changed uh, till a few years ago when everything obviously started to be a bit more flexible, which I absolutely love. But it still very much needs to be taught. It's more than just you're not going to turn into a man necessarily, but you are going to find different limits and capabilities.
Why should women get into fitness?
For me personally, fitness was just more than just lifting a bar over your head. Like it wasn't actually that for me. Fitness was a different perception on, facing challenges, I guess in a more short term way in comparison to life. It creates this platform where you can actually safely push yourself towards a limit, but also understand yourself more physically and internally. So, a bit of backstory for me, I just didn't realize fitness was actually, I guess, your way of therapy. I know, as cliche as it sounds, um, it is very much a great outlet for mental health. For me, it was a way to kind of, actually let out anger because I'm not exactly an angry person. So I figured training was actually letting it speak for itself. So I believe it's a great platform to, with the support of your coach or a community or with your friends, that you are actually able to push outside your limits, um, you versus you. And, it's always an opportunity for you to come back stronger, with a lesson. And, you're never really failing. You're just learning along the way. So I think that's why it's actually very much an important aspect. Step one. Step two is that actually it's actually good, for physiological sense, like you're looking after your well-being mentally. You're able to carry your kids and not have a bad back. That's one of the common things I do see. It allows you to feel good and, to de-stress if you are in a very demanding role these days. There's a lot of different health benefits, but also I think, you can meet great people along the way. And not that you can't do it anywhere else, but you'll find most people that you interact with have, you know, they help keep you accountable to be the best version of you.
It becomes a bigger community.
100%.
What age would you recommend for women or girls to get into fitness?
I'd say the younger you are, the better you are. It is quite intimidating, especially someone who is a little bit older, because there's a perception like it's too late. I can't do it. That's it. I've missed the window. But there's no age limit as to where you start. There is always going to be sometimes like boundaries and things you need to be mindful of. That's why we have your health professionals. But if they actually bridged the understanding of how this can actually set you up for long term longevity, and with the certain precautions, I think anything is possible. Like all it is really like movement rather than just sitting at home all day. Like it's your body's supposed to be used. It's supposed to be lived in a way that you're supposed to try it out. So any age is viable.
That's true. That's true. We were not born to sit down on a couch or on a chair.
Yeah, precisely.
What about the women who are pregnant? What advice would you give them?
If they're already training, it's really important that they would consult with a GP, preferably someone who has a bit of familiarity of exercise. There are some like GPs that will recommend sometimes against it, just because it's either something that's taught or they just haven't heard anything. But I believe movement is actually quite good. Obviously, for certain people, you have to really be cautious of what are your limits, and you cannot compare if you are training, for example, that you cannot do the workouts RX necessarily. Like at the end of the day, you are looking after two human beings and you can always go back into training. It's just going to be a longer timeline. So make sure you consult someone who knows the field and make sure your coach has the understanding of where you're at as well. Transparency and communication is key.
Next advice is for those women who want to start CrossFit.
Ladies, very important thing, like as you walk into the gym or if you want to ask a coach you want to join, like don't be fearful that you're going to make a mistake. Everyone, whether you're male, female, kid, older, elderly, injured, has had the feeling of starting something new. And starting something new is a very much a great thing. It means you're allowing yourself to trust this new journey and learning new limits. So the first day is always going to be step one of your journey, and just always take it each day as it comes. The more you show up for yourself, you do it for yourself, and trust that you're going to learn a lot of things about you is going to be the beauty of it. So don't fear that people are judging you. They're there to support you and guarantee they know exactly how it feels. So just start, do it, and see how you go.